Okay. Anyone encounter something they want to share or ask about this week? Okay, well, I'll go into my topics. Um, we have a listing we're in the process of taking, which is held in a trust. It's the parents had set up a trust and died, and there's an independent trustee, an attorney, not one of the beneficiaries. And there's several beneficiaries, heirs of the parents who are beneficiaries of the trust. And one of the beneficiaries leases the property back and has the most information about the property. It's a vacant piece of land, so we were going to do a vacant land property disclosure. And our agent asked if he should have the beneficiary fill that out and sign it because they know the most about the property. And I thought about it, and my first reaction was, well, if they make a mistake in filling it out that later becomes a legal issue, they're going to be unhappy with us because we made them sign a document that they really weren't obligated to sign because they weren't the owner, they're the beneficiary of the trust. But it was a unique question, so I did take it over to Bill Jansen, our legal counsel. And he agreed with that scenario that we shouldn't have the beneficiary complete or sign anything. The trustee is responsible. Now, the trustee, like I say, is an independent attorney and knows nothing about the property. Bill's opinion was that the trustee still has an obligation to disclose material facts of which they're aware or could easily become aware about the property. So the become easily aware part has, means a phone call to the beneficiary and asking them the questions that are on the vacant land disclosure questionnaire, and then filling it out based on those answers and signing it. So that's kind of the path we're going down. So the trustee, I think basically we're asking the beneficiary to fill it out. We're going to give it to the trustee, say, here's what the beneficiary has put in there. Can you sign this as the trustee? And I think that's how we're going to get the vacant land property questionnaire done. So several hoops to jump through there that were unusual in my experience anyway. Any questions about that? Okay. Hi, Dave. I see you on here. Give me a call later when you have a chance. I left you a voicemail early in the week when you have a chance. Another issue came up where we have a listing. Agents representing another agent is representing the buyer. The buyer, it's this is $1 million property. The buyer negotiated a $50,000 credit, I believe. for deferred maintenance or whatever is going on with the property. So it wasn't a price adjustment, it's a credit. So now we're getting close to closing. The seller agreed to it. We're getting close to closing, and our agent is suggesting that the commission should be paid on $950,000 and not $1 million because the buyer got a credit for that $50,000, which is all well and good if the other agent agrees to that. If our, listing agent wants to agree to that, I'd go along with that. But if the buyer's agent says no, you agreed to pay, 2.5% on the purchase price, the $1 million. So, it's about a $2,000 difference. They could kind of make a case about that. So, our listing agent did get the seller's agent or the buyer's agent to agree to accept the commission based on the reduced seller net rather than the gross sales price, and everybody was pleased at the end. But the main thing is if you can't just assume that the commission is going to be paid on that reduced number. It has to be an agreement. Technically, it should probably be an amendment to the listing agreement, indicating the reduced basis on which the commission will be paid. Any questions on that? All right. We got notice that there's a new Lake County disclosure and advisory that's been published. And obviously, we should be using that for all our Lake County transactions moving forward. If we have an existing transaction, it's probably not a bad idea to furnish the new one to the party, the buyer. I don't know, Dave, if you have a speaker and can address what the changes were in that Lake County disclosure. Dave manages our Clear Lake office up there. Dave says, don't have a speaker. Okay. Well, just know that we should use that new form, and our TCs should be advised, Chris Brown, and our other TCs, I let Katie know. So all our Lake County transactions will want to have that new disclosure. Okay. Dave says he hasn't got it yet. Okay. Another thing that came up this week was a tax certification requirement. And this was up in Dave's office, so he's probably familiar with it. One of our agents up there is representing a seller of a property who bought the property through a tax sale. Tax sale is when the taxes haven't been paid on the property, and some number of years pass. I don't even remember what it is. I think it's a large number. It's like 5 years or something. And after that time, if the taxes are still unpaid, the taxing authority, in this case the county, has the right to sell the property to recover their taxes. So there's a tax sale on. There's folks who specialize in buying tax sale properties. So I believe they're set up as auctions. I attended one years and years ago in San Francisco one time. So you go to the county, and the county, on the county steps, actually, they hold an auction, they name the property, and people bid, they say what's owed on it, and then people bid in excess of that until there's a final winner in the bidding, and then they buy the property. And they get what is called a tax deed. So a tax deed isn't kind of in the chain of title in a proper way. and maybe it can be challenged. So when you go to the title company and say, okay, I want to get, now that seller, he was happy, or that buyer, he was happy buying it, and he took his tax deed, and then he wants to turn around and sell it. So he got our agent to list it. Buyer came in. That buyer wants title insurance. Well, the title company looks at um, the title chain and sees his tax deed was how it was acquired, and they said, well, we don't insure that. We won't give you title insurance for that unless you obtain what's called a tax certification. So, and I'm not actually even sure of the procedures in getting a tax certification, but our agent told me it's a cost of over $2,000. And I don't know what the value of this property was. Some of our lots up there in Lake County are pretty inexpensive. It could have been $10,000. It could have been less. And now all of a sudden you got to spend $2,000 to get it insured. And so it becomes a new negotiation item between the buyer and the seller. And where I left it with our agent is, well, I hope, maybe the buyer and seller can split that and proceed with the transaction. I don't know how it turned out, but that's a little complication you might run into if you ever handle a property that was acquired in that manner. Any questions on that? Okay. All right, I'm going to go over the weekly practice tip that came out this past week. And it was a follow-up on the webinar regarding the NAR settlement and the buyer representation agreement. It was sent around to you all this week, but I thought I'd just cover it in case you haven't had a chance to read it. At least the questions I thought were timely. The question here, I thought sellers cannot pay commissions directly to, this is the question from one of our agents, or some, we aren't the only ones on these webinars. So this agent could have been with another company. So I think all of our agents would know better than this. But the question is, I thought sellers cannot pay commissions directly to a buyer's agent. I thought commissions were paid to the buyer, and then the buyer has the option to pay the agent. Well, of course, the answer is your assumption is incorrect. Once the NAR settlement is finalized, sellers can pay buyer's agents pursuant to a commission agreement, either the single party commission agreement, a form, or that's the SC form. Yeah, it says the SC form can be used for this purpose. Commission should be paid through escrow and should be set forth on the settlement statements. So of course, the seller can pay a commission to the buyer's agent. It just has to be in proper agreement form and accounted for on the settlement statement. Question, what happens with listings signed prior to the effective date of the settlement agreement? Do they have to be rewritten? And the answer is listing agreements signed prior to the effective date will need to be amended. CAR is currently working on an addendum for its June 2024 forms release, which would be in advance of the settlement. So that would be the form that we would use once the settlement is effective to amend the our listings, existing listings. Nothing needs to be done at this point. Question, can the seller refuse to pay a buyer's agent unless the buyer offers a sales price above the listing price? And the answer is yes. Seller can decline to pay a buyer's agent unless the buyer's offer or subsequent negotiations meet the seller's demands. So even if they got an offer at the asking price of the seller, if the seller hasn't agreed to pay the buyer's agent commission, they aren't obligated to. All buyer payments must be subject to a written agreement with the buyer's agent. So we're going to need these written agreements between us and the buyer, and then between the buyer's agent and the seller, unless the listing is offering a commission through other means. And you know, the offer in the MLS right now is binding on the, we all agree that if we offer a commission through the MLS, that's binding upon us. Once that's taken out of the MLS, there's no binding agreement any longer. So all those agreements are going to have to be in writing with the seller if the buyer's asking the seller to pay the buyer's agent commission. So we're going to have new forms and new procedures. You recall that settlement said that we would have to have a buyer representation agreement prior to touring a property with a client, a buyer. So the question is, how will the requirement prior to about touring be governed? This answer says that it will be a requirement of the multiple listing service. It will be governed in a similar manner as to all other requirements of the MLS. If an agent breaches this provision, a complaint can be made before the local association or MLS board, and the agent could face sanctions or potentially suspension of the agent's membership in the MLS. So the agreement must state that that's how it's going to be governed, that we would have an agreement with buyers prior to touring them around properties. I wasn't aware of that, and we have an MLS board meeting, Bayris board meeting next Friday. And I'm going to take that to them and see if, that we're looking at that. Question, if you are a realtor, are you required to have a written agreement before touring a home? And the answer is you must have a signed buyer representation agreement before touring a home with the buyer. If you are touring a home by yourself or on a broker's tour without a particular buyer, you don't need a buyer's representation agreement. So that's how it would be once this law becomes effective. And that follows up with the question about how do I deal with this at my open houses? If I am a listing agent and hold a home open, how do I manage buyers visiting or seeing the property? I will not have a buyer representation agreement with those prospective buyers, but they will be touring the property. How do I handle this? And the answer is this is a struggle the parties are having with the settlement agreement. The CAR is currently working on a short form buyer representation agreement for listing agents to use at open houses. That form is scheduled to be released with the June CAR forms release unless the issue is resolved by NAR in the meantime. If CAR does not release the form, BRM, Broker Risk Management, that's our group here, will issue a form for us to use. So essentially, if you're holding a open house and someone walks in, you're going to determine whether they already have a buyer broker agreement or have them sign a short form agreement. And we don't know exactly what that short form agreement says or is going to say. Follow up on that is, I'm a listing agent at open houses. What questions should I ask the buyer? And Parmita kind of had a suggestion on this yesterday. Parmita asked if she has a sign-up sheet for people who come into the open house, and she was going to add a column to it. Do you have are you currently represented by another agent? If so, do you have a signed buyer broker agreement? So there would actually be two columns. The answer to this question from BRM's point of view is ask the buyer if they are represented by another agent. If the answer is yes, ask the buyer if they have a written buyer representation agreement or agreements. This is the next part here that I'm not sure why, but it says if they say so, they do, request a copy. Now, I don't know why, if they tell me they've got a buyer representation agreement with another broker, I'm not sure why I would ask for a copy of it. So we need to get clarity on that. If you have any questions as to whether you can proceed to work with that particular buyer, discuss it with your manager or broker. It's kind of like we can't solicit listings we can't solicit a listing on a property that's currently listed with another broker or agent. Same thing would be true with the buyer. We can't work with a buyer who has a written buyer-broker agreement with another buyer-broker, with another agent or buyer or broker. Asking for a copy of it. I mean, we don't ask for a copy of listings, because we know the listing is a listing because it's in the MLS, and that we accept that they've got a listing, or they wouldn't put it in the MLS. With the buyer broker agreement, I don't know. I mean, buyers may just lie to us, and what do we want to ask them for a copy? Because I'll get clarity on that, and I'm sure that'll become more apparent as we move forward. Okay, question. I understand under the new settlement that listing agents may not post the commission being offered in the MLS. However, can the listing agent communicate that proposed commission through other media? And the answer is listing agents, according to the settlement now, listing agents may post the proposed commission to buyer's agents in other advertising, such as websites, marketing flyers, or other media marketing. However, listing agents should avoid participating in private or closed groups, such as on social media, where compensation to buyers agents is posted and shared. So what they're saying is, if we're going to use your flyer or your social media to offer a buyer's agent a commission on your listing, don't do it in some private group you have. There's marketing groups and so forth. They're kind of little MLSs unto themselves. They share stuff before they share. It's generally shared with the market. That's not going to be kosher any longer. Okay, question. If a buyer's agent questions a listing agent on the amount of the commission being offered to the buyer's agent, will there be a form so that the listing agent does not subsequently change it to offer a lower amount? Well, that's interesting because, it's assuming that listing agent, maybe I don't like that buyer's agent. I'm not going to offer them 2.5%. I only want to offer them 2%. Now in the MLS, you can't do that. Again, it's a unilateral offer of a commission in the MLS, and it's binding. But now that we don't have it in the MLS, what makes it binding? So BRM's answer to this question is a seller must agree to the commission being offered to the buyer's agent in writing, which should prevent this from happening. So if there's no offer of commission and the buyer authorizes us as the buyer's agent to request that commission be paid out of the seller's proceeds, we check that box 3G3 in the RPA and use the SPBB form. That's a seller's payment to a buyer's broker. And then the seller has to sign that, and that solidifies the amount that we're going to receive as a buyer's agent. So it's going to be signed by the seller, basically, and we really don't care what the listing agent does. Kind of. Okay. those are the questions I thought were pertinent. Any thoughts about those?
Garrett, can you go over the other ways that one can do offering a commission? I mean, is there anywhere, it seemed like from some of the previous stuff that you talked about that you could maybe put something in the private remarks to take the agent to a document? Can we include a document that will state the commission being offered, if there is one?
I don't think that's clear yet. What we can put in the private remarks. I mean, if we're gonna put it in the private remarks, we might as well put it in the CSO form, block. And in the CSO block, one of the problems was that wasn't visible to the public. But, in the settlement that NAR did with the DOJ in 2021, or two, I forget when it was, that they agreed to make that a public display. So now, for the past 2 years or so, the public can see what the buyer's agent is being offered in the MLS. So if they want to take it out of the MLS, why would they allow us to put it in private remarks? It doesn't make sense to me that they would.
Okay.
So I think we're going to have to learn another means of finding out if there is an offer to the buyer's agent from the seller or the listing agent.
So in the interim period up until the date in July, we would just continue to plug it in like we usually do?
Oh, yes, yes.
Okay, all right.
For sure. I'm sure, again, we have a Bayers meeting this coming week. We haven't had a meeting since that settlement came down. And as you know, Bayers is not a member of NAR, so we aren't automatically included in that settlement. So I'm sure we'll be discussing that, and MLSs may, prior to this agreement being accepted, just take that CSO box out of the MLS, in which case we'll have devised other means by which we communicate to the buyer's agents what they are potentially being offered.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So I had one last question come up this week. I'm going to share my screen here. All right. So here we have the last page, 15 of 16 of the RPA. So what we've got is the buyer's signature lines. And then we've got the acceptance lines. And the acceptance could be subject to a counteroffer, or in which that box would be checked, or not. So, and in this case, the buyer's offer was accepted. So the seller signed here. And then the buyer's agent was asking for a confirmation. There used to be a line down below here that there was an additional confirmation of acceptance of the offer. Well, they've taken this out of the form. There's no place down here for a confirmation like there used to be. That's what the other agent was asking for, and we went looking for it and said, oh, that was taken out. So there are two other boxes down here that we should use if they're appropriate. And that's this offer is not accepted box. So if the seller is just outright not accepting the offer and no counter offer is being made, and we can have the seller's initials and the date, and that's sufficient evidence. If we get a question then from the buyer's agent, oh, I don't think you even submitted that offer to the seller. We can fill out this part, which was the presentation of the offer. And here's the agent or the seller's initials. And it says the seller's brokerage firm presented this offer to the seller on such and such a date. So those are two forms that, or two boxes that can be used, but there's no longer what we used to be some kind of confirmation of acceptance on the contract any longer. Okay. All right, well, that's all I've got for today. Unless anybody's got a question, I will end this training and carry on with the next one. I will not have I will be in that Bayris meeting next week, so there will be no contract training next week. We'll pick it up the week after. All right. All right. For me to go move your car so you don't get a ticket. We'll see y'all later. Stay dry over the weekend. It's supposed to rain. See you later.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.